Rolling.
All right. Well, that'll be in just a second, because we're gonna do a call to order. We'll call the order at 6:31, roll call please.
Haas,
Here.
Espinoza,
Here.
Comitas, Landers,
Here.
Rapp,
Here.
Williams, Schrader.
Here. Okay, we can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have no visitors. I'm assuming we didn't receive any public comment ahead of the meeting.
Did not?
Okay. And we will begin our budget presentation and discussion, because this is technically our meeting before the meeting.
Correct. And so you have a handout in front of you as well. Really no substantive changes from last month when we had the same conversation. And so when we look at last year's, as you kind of recall, last year was a kind of a big crazy year in the world of finance. We borrowed borrowed some money, we transferred money a couple of different times, and so anytime that you do those things, you technically have to record them as revenue. And so by no means do we actually have $27 million in revenue, but that's just kind of the way it looks in the books. And so that was, of course, over budgeted, as well as on the expenditure side, you have to show that as well. And so we were over by about $3 million on both the revenue and the expenditure side. So when you look at, we were budgeted to have about a $1.2 million surplus last year, and in actuality, we put about $1.75 million in the bank. Big part of that was that $3 million in bond sales, but a lot of other different things as well, as you recall. Maybe it needs a new battery. Here we go. So when we look at our index, that 289 index, which allows us to look at all funds combined, as you would expect with putting $1.7 million in the bank, we had a nice uptick at the end of the last fiscal year. Typically trending in the $8 million range, and then in 22 we had broke $9 million, and then with that bond sale, almost at 11.
That's the end of the year number?
Correct. Yep, and our fiscal year starts July 1st and ends June 30th. So then when we look at this year, we're budgeting revenues of $16 million, which is very customary for us. That's what it should be. That's not anticipating any bond sales or transfers. Obviously, way down from last year's kind of crazy year, but that's $16 million is where we should be. On the expenditure side, budgeting at $18.7 million, and again, way down from last year's actual, which we would anticipate. And so when we look at what that means, last year we put $1.76 million in the bank. This year, our deficit's gonna be almost $2.7 million, which that's a lot, right? But it's exactly how we planned it out. This is exactly how, that's why we sold bonds. If you go back and balance out that $3 million in bond sales, we are paying for all of those projects now. And so let's kind of unpack that a little bit. First, looking at the Mendota Index, as you can see, even with a $2.7 million budget, it puts us right back into that $8 million sweet spot where we were before we started all of these conversations, anticipating ending the year at 8.2 million. And so, this is kind of the nuts and bolts of it, right? So when you look at this, the structural budget, what I mean by structural budget is you take away all the projects, you take away you strip out the kind of unusual stuff and see with what you're left looking at. So, $2.7 million in deficit spending, but we have to pay for $3 million in projects that we've already committed to, right? So if you look at just what would our budget look like if we didn't have any of those things, we'd be putting money in the bank, just if you let this year stand on its own. And so we would be in a positive cash flow situation,
Unincluding our bonds?
including our bond payment.
No, unincluding, if we hadn't taken that out, would we still be in the positive? Because I know we were using that for certain things.
Yep, so last year's bond sales, it was kind of a one and done. So that $3.1 million hit our accounts in, I don't remember, it was like April. And the only way that shows up anywhere in this year's budget is the fact that we have a bond payment. So that's of our expenditure total, that's about $1 million. So we have to repay that loan. And then the other place it shows up is in our fund balance. We have that money sitting there so that as we paid the $3 million in projects this year, that money's there to make those payments.
So to rephrase Amanda's question, the structural budget slide does not include either when you're talking about the 0.25 million surplus, that is not accounting for the bond revenue or the project expenditures.
That's correct.
Okay.
It is accounting for the bond payment.
The payment, right,
Yep.
because we'll have to make that payment now, it's like a car loan, but yeah.
Exactly right, yep. Mortgage on your house, car loan, exactly, it's an installment repayment, you bet. And so, this is also, none of this conversation is including the $1.9 million in grant revenue that will start to flow in once our solar actually goes up on our roof and we start to put solar energy onto the electrical grid. And so that's nowhere in this. And so if you wanted to, be extremely optimistic about it, we could start sprinkling some of that 1.9 million in this year's budget. Because I'm pretty sure we're gonna get some of it, but I want this to be as, realistic as possible. We don't know when that money's gonna hit, and I don't wanna speculate on that.
So when we approved the solar project, we estimated that would be in there, right, at some point. Like, we approved it with the estimation of the revenue back covering like 90-some% of the expense, right?
You bet.
So, since we had to pay 100% of that project up front out of the bond money, as that money comes back in, is the intention that that's allocated back in, essentially, like, are we putting it back in the fund balance, like where the bond money came out of, or like where is that money going? Are you planning on absorbing that into operational expenses, or?
So, you can look at that however you like. Schools have what's called fund accounting, so there's several different funds, education fund, operation and maintenance, bond and interest. And so, when we did this project and we sold these bonds and anticipated grant revenue, we kind of looked at that in a bucket, right? And so, the answer to your question is yes. That $1.9 million combined with our bond sales will more than pay off all of this last summer's work.
But we'll still owe that same bonding amount, like the installments will still be due over time, but we'll have this influx of revenue
So
this year, next year, wherever that falls.
Yep, and so we'll have that money sitting in the bank gaining interest, actually.
Okay, that was my question.
Yep.
Does that
You're not-
interest, offset the loan interest?
It actually
Which one
does
would be
right now.
better to pay?
It actually does right now, and I actually spent quite a bit of time in May at an IRS seminar at a conference I went to at 8 o'clock in the morning. Nothing says excitement like talking about IRS arbitrage at 8 o'clock in the morning. But for a lot, because the IRS gets, they kind of get a little anxious when you're borrowing money tax-free, and then you're making more in interest than you're paying in interest. They don't like any of that. But for a couple of different qualifiers, this project, we can do that and have it still be legal. And so yeah, so we're actually making more in interest right now than we're paying.
And remind me when, I don't remember, and maybe you don't either, but when we looked at the bonding capacity, we didn't take that all the way up, like we still have capacity should something arise and we need to be able to tap into bonding options.
For sure. And, you know, one of the nice things is that every year, our bonding capacity goes up by $1 million because we've paid $1 million off. And so every year that goes by, so 2 years ago, whatever our bonding capacity was, in the fact that we didn't sell any bonds for 2 years and paid off $1 million, we barely tapped into what our bonding potential is, what that maximum is. I don't remember those numbers right off the top of my head.
That's okay, I just wanted to make sure that we still had that as like a safety net. And then the other question I have is, I'm assuming the answer is yes, but the company we work with for bonding, they are constantly evaluating like the restructure options as those interest rates fluctuate and whether or not it would make sense for us to take that revenue, pay it off, or pay off a different one and restructure and all of that, or keeping an eye on all of that in our best interest.
Of course,
Okay.
of course, yes. Kevin Wills, who's the broker with Bernardi Securities that we work with, you know, he definitely touches base every once in a while. And, you know, just because he's done this one project with us, they don't walk away until the next time they do something there. Yeah, they constantly follow up, and we really like the partnership with them for sure.
Good. All right, thank you.
No, thank
Hold
you.
all that in, you got it all?
Yep. There's a quiz at the end.
Okay.
Okay, so we can, move to adjourn the, budget hearing at 6:45. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so now we will call to order the regular meeting at 6:45 PM. Roll call, please.
Cost?
Here.
Espinoza?
Yeah.
Comitas?
Yeah.
Landers?
Yes.
Rapp?
Yes.
Williams? Schrader?
Yes.
We don't have to pledge again, even though, you know. All right. And I'm assuming, okay, well, we have to do we'll go ahead and do our approval of regular meeting agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the regular meeting agenda as presented.
In a second.
Second.
Brenda seconds, roll call.
Schrader?
Yes.
Rapp?
Yes.
Landers?
Yes.
Comitas?
Yes.
Espinoza?
Yes.
Cost?
Yes. Still no public comments or visitors. Okay, and then we can have a motion to approve consent agenda, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda 5.1 disposition of minutes for August 2023, 5.2 payment of bills, 5.3 district treasurer's report, 5.4 interest and activity fund report, cafeteria report, and 5.5 the personnel report.
1 second.
And roll call.
Rapp?
Yes.
Landers?
Yes.
Schrader?
Yes.
Comitas?
Yes.
Espinoza?
Yes.
Cost?
I do not have anything specific other than a clarifying fact on that personnel report that's there. Can you just give us a quick, this is new, this will be the first time this is included in this, correct? This mentors meeting leaders? We did it last year on the
Yeah.
personnel report too, okay.
Yep, correct.
So this is the page teachers, the people they're assigned to are paid a stipend as a teacher mentor.
And how, is it 2 years?
1 year early.
Okay,
Yep,
so 1 year
yep.
based on the teacher's contract?
Correct.
Okay.
Just wanna make sure we went through that one. Okay. FOIAs.
We received a generic national question about, who's your certified school librarian, so we provided that information.
Okay.
Easy enough.
And then your report.
I actually don't have anything to add, to my report. We've got a lot of different things later in the agenda that, definitely need to spend some time.
Okay. And we have not met on any committees, so there's nothing to report out of that, so let's move right along. So the budget, again, this is the approval of the budget we had tentative last time. Are there any questions before we proceed in a motion on the budget? And remember, this is, we can submit, if things change or things look different, we can submit revisions, throughout the year for that, so if we could go ahead and have a motion on the budget, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the fiscal year 24 budget as presented.
In a second. Okay. And roll call.
Landers? Landers?
Yes.
Schrader?
Yes.
Rapp?
Yes.
Comitas?
Yes.
Haas?
Yes.
Espinoza?
Yes.
Okay, that passes. Let's talk about student sport fees.
Yeah, so, I had, some information that, you asked me to kind of put together, and so I put kind of a little one-page kind of fact sheet here. Our total cost from athletics last year, was $67,000. Our student activity fee revenue was $7,000, and then I just kind of did the math on a couple of different kind of things that we talked about or kicked around. If we did a waiver of fees for students on free and reduced lunches, of that 7,000, we would lose in the neighborhood of 3,700 of that, but also 3,700. Another proposal would be to limit the fees to $70 per family, and the approximate lost revenue on that would be 1,400. And then limiting the fees to $70 per student, the approximate lost revenue would be $500 a year. So,
So that's kids doing more than two, isn't that?
correct,
Okay.
yep, it would be more than 2.
So I have a question, Brad. The total cost of athletics, did you, include the transportation in that?
I
Or is it
did
just
not.
stipends, uniforms, and,
That would not include transportation.
okay, so,
I
And
don't-
probably not also postseason
Don't
expenditures.
know that, it
or
would,
tournaments?
it would, yep, it would include all of those things.
Oh,
No, it does not.
Okay, so it's, would you guess that that's probably close to like 80,000 because of transportation to all the tournaments and games, regular season games?
My guess, yeah,
Okay,
that would be another,
okay.
yeah.
So essentially, we go in the hole for athletics. I know we had mentioned it, I just wasn't certain about how much.
Yep.
So what we're voting on today is whether or not this year's fee stays the same?
You can make whatever motion you want, it's on the agenda.
Right
to
now,
have
have they
whatever.
been charged? Cause I know athletics
Yep.
have begun, so
Yep.
those sports were already charged the regular athletic fee.
Correct,
And
And
those
what
have
is
already
it
been paid by
currently?
families, the $35.
35,
A sport?
correct.
I think messing with it this year would be too silly.
And again, just to reiterate, families that cost would be the only reason their student couldn't participate, is that communicated out in a way to allow them, cause we could offer payment plans for that, correct?
We do offer payment plans for different things,
Okay,
correct.
so they could split that up over the course of several months.
Did we put up somewhere to see, that if you had an issue, there was a waiver to sign somewhere? Not a lot of people were aware of that, and we talked about it.
I thought we were gonna send out a survey.
So you're talking about registration fee waiver,
There you go.
the registration fees. I think we had talked about, cause those had already been pushed by the time of our last meeting. talked about having that
I
in
think
place
it
for
was
next year.
just making sure that that knowledge was out there for people if they did need a little extra help. As we knew it wasn't front and center for anyone to know about.
Can that just be a note in like your next update that goes out to families, just a reminder, we never want people to feel like, you know, there aren't options in regards, they may qualify for a waiver, that everyone qualifies for payment plans.
Communicating.
Yep.
So for that, do they have to provide proof that they're not able to?
The waiver is state guidelines, right?
Correct.
So the state poverty guidelines, like the free and reduced, the free lunch guidelines then would qualify, but not for technology, right? Isn't that it?
That's charged to everyone.
Yeah, so it's a portion of the fee that's waived.
Yeah, but with everybody on free and reduced lunch.
Well, there's
I mean-
difference between free and reduced.
Right, but I mean, right,
Should be into that grant
isn't
that we have,
everybody,
This, right.
Oh,
nobody's getting charged for lunch this year?
No, but I mean, that's just, that terminology just
Right.
means your families that meet the poverty guidelines of the state of
That
Illinois.
if we didn't qualify for the grant, would you get it or would you not get it?
And how would they know this year?
Because you would have to specifically fill out the paperwork, and
Right.
typically, we can take the cafeteria programs, free and reduced paperwork,
Right.
and apply that to registration fees, but now families would have to specifically fill that out, and it would just be for registration fees, because lunches are free.
Okay.
But yeah, I can definitely make sure that we communicate
Okay,
that,
I think that would be
of
good.
course. Sorry.
Sarah's gonna take off in a UFO.
I know, I turned it off silent in case she called.
Okay,
So, I don't know how to get it started, but personally, I think I'm against proposal number 1. If anybody else is, we could maybe cross 1 or 2 off the list right away.
I'm in favor of not considering any of them for
Yes.
this year and just.
Not for this year.
Yeah,
But-
and this was for this, we don't need to be passing fees for next year yet.
Okay.
I think that would be, cause that's a conversation we have in the summer when we set up
Right.
registration fees and technology fees and,
Yeah, March or April, so we can,
So
have it
we
lined.
started this conversation, it's been a few now, 3 months or so.
It was in like June, I think I was not present, I was virtually, but I agree with you, Teresa. I think it's something that we leave it the way it is for this year, and we look at it
in the spring.
in the spring. Because I think that it'd be interesting to see to go into this information, like with now having the longer season, the IESA fees, the transportation, and that, and really look at the breakdown of the athletic budget and, but I think it's something in the spring. I don't think we do anything with it now, cause that's just more work on the,
And I think when we look at it in the spring, Brad, if you give us a heads up, like the month before, then if there's any other questions, like I do think gathering the transportation expenses, getting a full picture of what it looks like, and then also I think it would be important for us to take a look at what other area elementary districts charge. We can kinda have that conversation in the spring to be better prepared and not come at it so late.
And I think it would be good too that parents are aware of, okay, these fees go to, you know, transportation, referees,
Equipment, uniforms,
Yeah,
like all
they're
of
just
it.
Yeah, like
saying,
I'm writing
"Oh,
this down
we're just
going-
paying the coach, or we're just doing,"
Right.
you know, no, it runs a full spectrum.
And I do think it's important for them also to know that the $67,000 doesn't even include the transportation, so if it's more like 80 or 80, I mean, like, we're not bringing anywhere near that amount of money. Like, we're bringing like 10% or less
Less
of the
than
cost,
10%,
so
Right.
if people are struggling with the idea of paying the 35, I do think giving them the full picture of, yeah, it's also costing.
It's being
Yes.
subsidized heavily by.
Significantly,
Well,
right,
and-
and that's a conversation we have too, we had it a little last time. Is that even fair to the non-athletic families that we are allocating an extra $70,000 of our budget every year of non-refundable expenses to athletics, like that's a conversation you have to have. And I think it's important to look at.
Well, and I would agree with that in the sense that I currently, you know, my new position, both districts, one district pays 75, one has a limit of 150. And they don't even get transportation to games. They don't get transportation to the practices. Like, they're driving 7 miles to the other school for practices, and they're driving their kids to games. So they're paying.
The parents are transporting their
Yes,
kids.
because
Sounds
we,
like Holy Cross.
well, it's small, because what it is transportation is over budget.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So you know
And-
what you gotta do.
Yeah, and that's the cuts that we took, that the parents will drive.
So I think it's part of a larger discussion, and perhaps if we do approach it early spring, we might be able to have a survey going out to parents and talking about, we're just really heavily considering this, we wanna hear back from you, like, we do provide transportation, we do provide, you know, all these other things at this expense, and if we leave our fees the way they are, there won't be, you know, like, we can't expand, cause we've also had a lot of people ask us about, could we bring other sports options in, could we have intramurals, could we have some like learning leagues, could we do other things? Maybe we could, but as it stands now, that's a big chunk of the budget going there already without any sort of reimbursement, so. I think it's a great conversation to have, but if no one, if we aren't making any changes to the fees, then we do not need to have the action item, correct?
Correct.
So, does anybody wanna bring it for motion, or you?
No.
Okay.
Could we maybe, in the spring, when you're preparing all this, Brad, can you, you know, have that document and then also, have the breakdown of the participation numbers too? So like girls' basketball has 50 students or whatever.
Or maybe just how many of the kids play a sport and how many don't.
Well, like I have a Google sheet of all this, and then each sport has a different tab, so that I know if the expenses was $30,000 or $10,000 for that sport, then really what's it costing per
Athlete to play.
athlete?
Or, I guess I'm curious as to what if you have the same athlete in, you know, 3 different sports? Do we count them 3 times as part of the number, or do we count 1? I would like to see, you know,
Yeah,
how
I'm just-
many individuals are participating.
Yeah.
You know, are we, you know, because a lot of times they're involved in more than one.
Mm-hmm.
And then, is it the majority of kids who are out for an extracurricular? Is it a third? Is it
I
a
think the
fourth?
other
What is it?
piece of the conversation, since we're kind of making this a bigger thing, would be interesting is I know right now in a number of our sports, especially like our younger sports, we have 10 times the number of kids going out for the sport than what we can take. So when you're gonna take 8 cheerleaders and there's 35 trying out, like what way are we engaging the other kids that are clearly looking for
We had
something?
35 cheerleaders trying.
I don't know, I made that number up, but it was a big number.
Uh-huh.
But same thing with volleyball last year. I mean, we are cutting 2/3, if not more, of the kids that are trying out. And I just wanna make sure, and that's interesting because, you know, Mendota just talked about getting that grant for healthy things for kids to do in their communities and stuff. Like maybe there's potential for us to tap into that for some intramural stuff. If we have the space, maybe they could help with the expense. Just, there's not a lot for kids to do around here, especially at those younger grades. And if we can keep them engaged, and then they have to remain eligible by their grades and everything, so it really does contribute back. I think that'd be part of a neat conversation.
Oh, sure. And what's that going into the future with the high school programs? We're cutting them that young, cause then I don't wanna go back out.
Right. Okay,
That's
good
what I'm
conversation. So maybe like March? Will give us enough time to bring it
Yeah,
back a
maybe
few
have,
times. if
yep,
we need
maybe
to.
have it be a discussion item in February.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect, awesome, looking forward to it.
Thank you.
All right, press policy 111, this is Fate's Law, right?
Correct.
And we are bringing on the same company that everybody state is doing to monitor that, or?
I don't, so, yeah, we're onboarding, Bushu, they're
Yeah.
an HR company out of Effingham. They work with more than half of the schools in the state, and they will help us with that extra investigative work. So in a nutshell, Faith's law says that, your standard criminal background check that we always do and have done for a long time isn't enough. That there has to be additional background work that's done on your employees. And so, we don't have the process, the manpower to do that, and so they'll help partner with us to get that done.
Even the huge districts aren't doing it, everybody's looking for services, cause they're very unique. 'cause
How
they're
much,
very
how
unique.
much extra time did all that paperwork put on the staff when, new hires, especially after July 1st? Cause me personally, I know that I had to fill them out and I had to distribute them. Like, how much more is that being put on the district office currently, since, or previously?
You mean, what are we doing now?
Like, how much more work for them not to do what they normally were doing is now tracking that paperwork down, because it can be a pain.
Yeah, so currently, we're not doing the additional investigative work. We will do that once we adopt this policy and we onboard Bushu.
Okay.
That's when we'll start.
But are they filling out paperwork and putting in if there's any, so you fill out the paperwork and
Yep.
and then they return it within the 21 days. And if somebody says that there's an issue, then are we just leaving it at that? Or we just not worrying about?
We're continuing to do everything that we were always required to do, criminal
Okay.
background checks and all of that. And once we adopt this policy, and onboard Bushu, then that's when we'll start the additional steps.
The additional paperwork and all that?
Yep.
Okay.
Cause
Yeah.
faith laws, when does you required, is it December you're required to have something in place to do that
I
by?
think it's December or January, something in
Okay.
that timeframe.
And that's just for certified staff, or is it for like if
Yeah.
I wanna go
Anybody.
help in the lunchroom as well?
All staff, yep. Anybody's gonna be around your kids.
It's good, it's just tedious.
Especially if you've worked a lot of places. So, like when I filled out my paperwork, I had to go back to my first job working at classes. You know what I mean? And you're filling out paperwork for people that aren't even there anymore, or businesses that aren't even there.
Is that including subs too?
Correct.
That's done through the ROE.
Yeah,
I
the
think.
ROE would take care of that part. Okay. So we need action to adopt trust policy, or trust policy 111.
Make a motion to approve the trust policy 111 as presented.
I'll second.
And roll call.
Schrader,
Yes.
Cobb,
Yes.
Spinoza, Cumitas,
Yes.
Landers. Yes. Rapp.
Yes.
Moving along to the cameras.
Super exciting, we got there. Yeah, a lot of good conversations and a lot of good process, and so, very excited. It's the same firm that we've been actually doing quite a few other things with. The scoreboard at Northbrook, the new, sign out front in Northbrook, and so, we will, get started with them, and they'll work in off times, and they've been here enough that they can actually work, do some hallway work even while school's in session and in between classes and things like that. So, we'll have that up and running fairly quickly.
Can you please review the cost, and it's okay if it's not exact dollars, but when we first approached this before?
Yeah, so we actually did a formal, RFP for this in the neighborhood of, I'm gonna say 16 months ago. And the three proposals that we had submitted, the cheapest of the three was somewhere in the neighborhood of $135,000. Now, this is installing new camera systems in across all three buildings. So, this is a really robust solution to be able to upgrade everything, that we're doing in our ability to monitor everything that's going on across campus. And so then continue to have different conversations, look at different avenues, then we were able to come back now with a solution that's, you know, a third of the cost. It's $91,000, and that's 20 new cameras in each of the smaller two buildings, 40 new cameras here in Northbrook with all the recording and access equipment, and to be able to access it remotely, and it's just a great solution.
And there were 3 proposals submitted by them, correct?
Correct.
And which of the 3 is the option that you're suggesting, the scope of work?
No.
Those are all
So
3.
that,
Okay.
correct, you got
I
it.
was confused, okay.
Yep, they just have it broken down by building.
Okay, so proposal 1, 2, and option 1, 2, and 3 really aren't options there. Okay. As much as I say I hate spending this volume of money, we've talked about safety and security being one of our primary concerns, and we have had circumstances over the last several years where it becomes a hearsay situation, or we're attempting to pull video off of really grainy things. Being able to access this remotely would also mean that we can provide access to law enforcement,
That is correct.
which is also a great.
Will, you mentioned about law enforcement, well, I know at least one of the area districts, the law enforcement can actually go in off of the cameras. Will this allow them to? Will they have access to it?
We haven't had those conversations.
Okay, I just know that.
In the
One
past.
one of the districts not far, I believe it's actually maybe Peru.
I'm
Has-
sure that the high school probably does too.
Yeah, that they can actually, security, that the police can actually, yeah.
It might be that you have to have an IGA in place, probably, because it's student record, but,
Possibly.
but yes. I mean, given a terrible circumstance, somebody could go off-site, pull it up, and be able to respond, which is great. Or if like an alarm's going off remotely, you can tap in and look and don't have to come sit in the building and replay
For sure.
video. All right, are there any other questions on this? They would be beginning work now
In the next month or two, yes.
with a completion date of a couple
My-
months.
Yeah, my guess would be January, February, September.
Any other questions on it? Okay. We could have a motion for the approval of the camera system, as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve the IP camera system as presented.
Roll call.
Landers,
Yes.
Rapp,
Yes.
Schrader,
Yes.
Comitas,
Yes.
Espinoza,
Yes.
Cost.
Yes.
Okay, that's exciting. All right, our annual EIS report. This is an annual required publication. Wanna say anything else? or
Yeah, and
is
then after it gets approved, then it goes on our website. One of the state mandates is that there's a record of all certified personnel and what their compensations or salary benefits, that kind of thing. So this report just codifies that, and then after it's approved, just goes on our website.
And it's always a year in arrears, right?
Correct.
Yep.
Do we continue to, post the non-certified, because at one point, I think, right when I was getting on the board, we used to post the non-certified.
You have to above a certain dollar amount. I think it's
75,000. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I just remember that it was always posted, and I don't know if it's been
Any
posted.
non-certified?
there.
I don't know if there's any answer.
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, cause that's the mandate. The mandate isn't just that it's all cert and all of it, yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Any questions on this? You'll find this on every school district's website, cause it's state mandate. If there's no more questions, could we have a motion to approve the EIS report?
I'll make a motion to approve the annual EIS report as presented.
Second,
I'll second.
and roll call.
Landers,
Yes.
Comitas,
Yes.
Espinoza,
Yes.
Rapp,
Yes.
Cos, Schrader.
Yes.
The para MOU.
So our para committee, has met several times, and one of the things that, came out of those meetings, were, kind of some ways that, the teacher evaluation process either needed to be, streamlined or elaborated on, or additional, rules put in place. And typically, the para committee has the latitude to just make those changes. But in our actual teacher contract, we have the first 30 or so pages of it, or the actual contract, and then the next 50 plus are a lot of different kind of in the weeds mechanisms on how things function. And so, in a lot of other districts, the peer committee would just have the ability to make these changes. But since all of those pieces are actually in the negotiated agreement between the board and the association, then there has to be an MOU in order to make those changes. And so all of these changes were made as recommendations, unanimously by the para committee, which is a committee comprised of an equal number of teachers and administrators.
So it's strictly changes to the evaluation tool and process.
Process.
Okay.
You got it.
Any questions? Okay. Motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the para MOU as presented.
Second.
One second.
And roll call.
Espinoza,
Yes.
Landers,
Yes.
Cos,
Yes.
Comitas,
Yeah.
Rapp,
Yes.
Schrader.
Yes.
Are we still evaluating, teachers that are in the pipeline ready to retire?
Every teacher gets evaluated, yes.
Okay, cause I'm under the impression that if a teacher is in the pipeline ready to retire, we no longer will have to evaluate him to, get rid of the process of an evaluation process for teachers.
That's not a part of our process.
Okay.
SIPCIGA.
So the SIPC, I don't remember what the letters stand for, is a statewide cooperative that is specifically for custodial and maintenance products and processes. Again, more than half of the schools in the state belong to this. It's about 10 years old, and it just makes so much sense. One of the things that we would access almost immediately is they have every year, I think it's every 3 years, they have a huge bid process with all of the big box stores to kind of a best pricing kind of thing. And so right now they're currently in a cycle with Home Depot, which is perfect for us, right out of Peru. And so this cooperative, in addition to being able to provide different professional development resources and some other best practices, will literally be able to save us money. And so I know the high school is already a part of this.
Is there a cost to participate? It is the Schools of Illinois Public Cooperative,
There you go.
in case you're wondering. Okay.
Thought of it as the Costco for the schools.
Oh,
Okay, and is the IGA 1 year?
It's indefinite.
Indefinite, okay. Do we have any other questions? Motion, please.
Motion to approve the SIPC IGA report as presented.
I'll second.
And roll call.
Schrader,
Yes.
Rapp,
Yes.
Landers,
Yes.
Comitas,
Yes.
Espinoza,
Yes.
Cos.
Item 8.1 is our summer facilities. Issue of summer.
Yeah, so, just kind of continuing the conversation about, what we want next year to look like. If you'll recall, we kind of got this master list of, a 5-year plan of what this, looks like. And so this is kind of a first attempt to look at what can we start to take off of that list in order to continue that conversation. These are all priority 1 items off of that list. And so the easiest way to do would be to look at, you know, kind of one of these the main map right on the front. This would be kind of divided into basically 4 areas. We're looking at all at Northbrook. All of this colored area on this big map, this is all ceiling and lighting work across the entire building. This smaller map is where we have some really bad asbestos tile flooring that would need to be brought up and replaced. And then the other components to it would be the rearrangement, reformation of our existing teacher's lounge to make it an actual teacher's lounge and workspace. And then the only other piece in this that would be under conversation would be the front awning roof and the front awning structure in front of Northbrook, to have that updated so it doesn't leak and those kinds of things. As I have had initial conversations with JRP Wegman, so this the entirety of this is, if you look at their last page, that's their package B, which is $1.8 million. Unless other people have, you know, different thoughts, please share. With where we sit right now and the way things are flowing financially, I don't know that it's in our best interests to spend that much this year. I think that it would be prudent to wait till we start getting some of that grant money flowing through and we kind of know what that's gonna look like and how that's gonna be able to come in and offset some things. So I do think it's important to continue the momentum that we have, but also I think it's important to be really measured and really responsible about how we move forward on next year's processes.
When do they need us to tell them what their summer work looks like?
Absolute latest January. I think last year we made that commitment in December, and that December is a really good time frame. But this is a really big commitment, a really big conversation, so I wanna make sure that we have lots of time to kind of walk through this.
You're recommending not doing anything or not doing that letter B?
I'm recommending not doing letter B. Yeah, cause that's,
Isn't there potentially grant dollars available for the lighting portion?
it's already included.
Oh, that's already taken off of that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yep, and GRP Wegman coordinates all of that.
okay.
If you look at their package A, basically what that is this 5th grade wing work, that removed. And so doing the 6th grade wing and the 7th and 8th grade wing, get you down to $1.1 million.
What is the thought behind why we wouldn't do that? I mean, I know it's money, but like, why did you say like only the 5th grade area wouldn't do it as opposed to saying like, we just won't do something from all the areas as opposed to not doing anything in that area?
So, of all of the things that we've talked about, to me, that's the one that can most easily wait. There aren't as pressing of issues. Regardless of what we do this upcoming summer, from my perspective, we have one must-have, and that's the hallways for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Those glass things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But those are also in the 5th, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're in here, remove them properly, just those angled glass and one
Yeah.
ceilings.
Yeah, they're in the 5th, cause that used to be that was the K 1, 2, 3, 4 when this was neighborhood schools. Like, me personally, and even me being a teacher, like, I feel like I feel like the fifth grade wing and those glass and those display cases is more important than a teacher's lounge. You know what I mean? Like I understand, like, that teacher's lounge is crappy, cause it's been crappy for 35 years, you know what I mean? But I feel like the safety of the display cases and that if somebody could come in and they start shooting, that to me is more important than a teacher's lounge when I could be in my classroom preparing my materials.
Yeah, I can't think of where there's angled glass in that hallway.
What is the, also if we could figure out, I know that we're doing it in pieces so that they make sense for them to not do one thing and then close it up and then do it again. So if we're not doing this part, does it cost us more essentially to place it with something else?
Yeah, so you always wanna make sure that, that what you're doing, there's a big enough kind of economy of scale. Which actually is a part of the asbestos tile conversation. Because we don't need all of that asbestos tile removed now, but the tile's bad enough that they're gonna have to tint it, meaning they're gonna have to, put the plastic at all the entrances and go in with spacesuits and all of that kind of stuff, and so it's like the most, all-encompassing type of asbestos removal. And so, all of that area that's indicated is bad enough that it's all gonna have to be tinted. Well, once you do that for a little bit, then it's way cheaper to just tint it once and get it all while you're in there. So yeah, there's definitely a big part of that in this conversation.
Could we have a deeper breakdown of cost? Do they have anything deeper than this that can give us an estimate around, like, of the 1.8 million? Where is it, like, if we didn't remove the downspouts, I'm assuming that's not super expensive.
Right.
But like, could we kind of get a feeling for rolling up project costs a little?
Yep,
Okay.
yep, for sure. I can, so I can,
I like that, but then when we were doing some of the other larger projects, we didn't do that because we were trusting that, if we start picking and choosing and nuts and bolting, I think we can have
Well,
way too many conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt a little bit more comfortable with it at the time because we kind of had the money set aside through the sale of the bonds to cover the costs. But if we're already gonna be deficit spending for the year, and then we're talking about even the lower package of 1.1, I'm not even like super comfortable. That makes me very nervous too, unless we know that there's the grant money coming in. So like, I'm not even sure that like either of these are low enough yet, so that's why I'm wondering like, what's even like option C, but going the other way, to look like. So that's more of what I'm talking about, like not necessarily like dollar amount for each one, but okay, these building exterior stuff, we don't have to do these, but this is really only $10,000. Okay, well that's not gonna make or break it that much.
for sure.
I also think people are more comfortable when you're spending your money when they're seeing the impact of stuff. So, I mean, you're doing the behind the scenes, no fun stuff, which is necessary, okay, but if you've taken those glass things and you're more apt to not hear.
Yeah, and I would echo what Teresa is talking about. I think we would have to see some fairly quickly. I think we would have to see some pretty big movement on the solar project and grant money and that kind of thing, for me to even recommend anything that's over $1 million.
Yeah.
I think that we need to scale this back, look at what are most kind of essential and the things that we really need
And
to
what
look at.
what is wrapped up in grant money, cause that I think is important too. That was the big seller with the solar. We knew that we were getting most of it back. So if a lot of this LED stuff comes back to us, then I would say rather than not doing the 5th grade wing for that, because half of it's gonna be covered, then why don't we do that? Like, I think those are the kind of things where I would feel a little more comfortable and like, you don't have to give us exact dollar amounts, but I think chunks of area where money costs, and then of the, cause I thought too, some of this fire rated wall assembly might have been, some of that fire stuff might have been a potential grant,
Yeah, that's what they
the
mentioned.
firewall. I thought he said something about
Follow
that too.
up with that.
So just, it would be good to know what's reimbursable as far as
Well, and
fire.
are these are all those fives? These are the fives, I'm guessing, based on the presentation last month, Brad?
What do you mean the fives?
They had it rated. They had
The 1, 2, 3,
the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, so ones were the ones that
Okay.
were the most pressing, so ones,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, I think the building exterior is not as important as getting these wings done, and if, you know, obviously the asbestos, if you do one, you gotta do it all.
Unless there's a reason, like if the downspouts and pitch has something to do with the new solar stuff, I don't know.
Yeah,
It does.
yeah.
It
Okay.
doesn't.
It's
Yeah, like-
purely aesthetic stuff.
Well, that roof is leaking. That
Okay.
one roof is leaking.
It's more important to me about the safety of the students and the staff than, a downspout.
I got you.
Yeah, so
But,
maybe they
so,
need to give
so
us
just,
more.
yeah, so just kind of in general terms, if you look at everything that they've kind of put on the table here, of the 1.8 million total, 1.3 of that is lighting and ceilings. So all the other stuff that you're talking about is the $500,000 or less. And I think off the top of my head, I think $250,000 of that is the asbestos abatement and tile replacement. So, yeah, we can definitely break that apart a little bit, and I can definitely work with them to kind of press that. You know, I would definitely like to see an option C or D that's, you know, less than $1 million.
Especially the commitment early, like, maybe we go, you know, under promise, over deliver, like, okay, so we are really only comfortable by December or January saying this, right? But if we begin to see revenue and if timing and material ordering and all that
For sure.
work out, then maybe we can add some things come March, but if not, like, I just feel, I think we're sharing that same level of,
Yeah.
with committing to anything big.
Yeah.
I know we've spent a lot of money.
Yeah. Okey dokey. Well, we will hear more.
Yep, we'll continue the conversation.
I have one other quick thing, unless you have anything else, Fred.
No, ma'am.
So I spoke yesterday with our field services rep from ISD, about continuing education opportunities for us as a board. And she's super, friendly lady, and we talked through, they have probably 40 programs pre-built, and then they can also accommodate and customize their different learning opportunities and workshops and things. So we talked through a lot of it, and we kind of came away with what I think would be a reasonable proposal, which is that we would look at bringing them in 3 times over the course of 6 to 9 months. And each time they would come, it would be a 3-hour workshop. So it would probably be a separate day. So if we could figure out like 3 times over 9 months where we could have a 3-hour meeting, kind of looking at it from a progression standpoint, starting with what they have one that's called like starting right or right start or something like that, that essentially is made for new board members, but also new teams. So even if everybody's not new on the board, understanding the team dynamic and how you operate and the function of the board and the role of the board, role of superintendent, relations between the different constituents across the district. So kind of sets the stage, essentially. That would kind of be the first one. The second one would be goal setting and goal refinement. So I told her we've set kind of like high-level visionary type goals, but not necessarily where somebody can sit down and say, rate with concrete data each of these things that are here. And she did explain that in some cases that's not the role of the board. The role is the board is to set the strategy and allocate the resources, and the specifics around whether or not, you know, data proves that something is yes or no is often the responsibility of the superintendent and the administration and the district, but being shared back to the board, but not authored by the board. So just understanding a little bit more of what that could look like, visiting where we sat last time we developed those visionary goals, and are there new ones? Have we accomplished a lot in the safety realm already, so looking at, maybe revisiting what some of other things could come up as priorities. So that would be one of them. And then the last one, is really kind of evaluation in general, so evaluation of, the board's self-evaluation, evaluation of the superintendent, not using the specific tool, but how you rate that, evaluation of your goals and vision that you set as a district, and that often, she said, involves bringing community members in as part of the conversation, which I thought was really neat, as a way to say, like, how do you measure effectiveness and success within schools within your community, and what can that look like, and how should we measure it, and how often should we measure it, and all of that. And they've actually refined that program this year, and they kind of have it like in a beta. She said there'd be no cost to that third component for us to have them out for that. The other ones do cost, and I cannot for the life of me remember exactly how much, but they're very minimal, like hundreds of dollars, not thousands of dollars, to have them out. And so she said if we're comfortable with it, what she could do is throw, like, cause they schedule them out way out, so she could throw me some dates, we could figure out if it would work. But I said I wanted to bring it back and kind of just get a gut feeling for where everybody's at. We said, once we finally settled 7 people in the chairs, we really wanted to get back to educating and understanding the role of the board and pushing forward with not just doing the things we have to do every month, but setting ourselves up for how can we do things better, and how can we enhance what our job is without overstepping, I guess. So if everybody likes that idea of kind of breaking it into 3 continuous things, is that?
Yeah. I've done, the part where you bring in the community members and the staff members. I did that when I was in LaSalle. And that was actually very eye-opening.
Amanda, any thoughts? Sarah, anything you wanna add to that?
I don't have anything to add, but I definitely like it, and I like that, or I should say thank you for, I guess, having that conversation with them and getting us back going on that, because I was actually thinking to bring that up at some point now that we're, all seated, that we can get back to that.
Okay. So I will reach back out to our field representative and ask her to let us know how far out they're scheduling for that first one, and what her schedule, like, depending on how many months in advance it looks like. We may wanna even set the first couple dates up. And then also, when we're at the III conference in Chicago, we'll make sure, like, we'll figure out a time when she's at the booth, cause it tells us when the different people are at the booth, so we can also go as a board and kind of look at the other resources, cause they have little write-ups on the different classes and programs that they offer, and different field representatives are better at other things. I did ask specifically about the superintendent evaluation one that they offer, and she was very honest with me that a lot of that program that they offer is actually them sort of selling their super eval tool that they have. So unless you're looking at spending the money on building the evaluation within that tool, which I have to use that tool for my own, I think we can easily duplicate it on the outside, given it's one evaluation without making that expenditure. But she did say they could talk about evaluation of everyone, including the superintendent, at the evaluation session. It just wouldn't be its own session unless you're using the super eval tool. So, and they do have sessions on super eval at III, or like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me, cause I'm on it. But all right, well, I will communicate with everybody. When I get an email from her, I'll forward it to you guys so you can see where we're looking at for scheduling. But I think we're getting right back on the right track with that and moving forward. So.
Talking about the III, when are we getting our information with our hotels and anybody know? Usually we get them.
We're at the Sheridan.
Okay, and just confirming like that the dates that we said we were there.
Unless you have told us differently, you have rooms for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night.
Is everybody going?
I'm coming Saturday.
As far as I know.
And then, do we have any special events for that,
Of course.
okay,
I will,
I might-
as we get closer, I will
Okay,
outline
okay.
all of those.
okay, life's a little different right now.
I actually, just, made our Saturday night reservation for Howard the Moon today.
Okay.
What?
either.
Howard the Moon.
This Thursday or Friday?
It starts Friday morning if you're signed up for things, and then otherwise, Friday afternoons?
Yep.
So Saturday night's Hall at the Moon?
Saturday night's Howard the Moon. Friday night's our board dinner with GRP Wakeman. I think it's gonna be barbecue and cornbread again.
Okay. When you have times on that, will you let me know?
Of course.
I'll be on a cruise boat by myself.
I'll be arriving Saturday, after hopefully I get a regional win, since we're hosting our IDSA regional.
Okay, if there's no other things, could we, before you leave, if you run right with me, close, you need everyone needs to sign budgets. So
Yeah.
every signature on every one of these copies, so don't leave till you've done it. And could we have a motion to adjourn at 7:38?
I'll make a motion to adjourn at 7:38 PM.
Second?
All in favor? Any opposed? Okey dokey. Sarah, do you wanna just make arrangements to stop in when it works for you?
Yes,
Oh,
I will be in contact and I'll come in as soon as I can.
Alright,
So
sounds
sad.
good, hope you feel better.
Districts.
Thank you.
Alright, talk to you later.
Thumbs up,
Bye.
brought it up at the thing, that we need to get that pushed
Is
through.
it next
Yeah.
year?
So,
We-
I said, well, we talked about that at our school board meeting, that
It's
we need
every
that.
other year, so there's not elections on